Alright, all eyes are up here. We're going to make this super short and sweet. So today we are going to talk about the cell membrane, okay? And then tomorrow we're going to get into transport. I'm going to give you a little introduction to it today because transport, there's quite a few different things that we need to know. But today's focus is the cell membrane. So, what boundary separates one country from another? The border, that's right. Maybe we're working. There we go. All right. So we've already talked about this when we talked about types of cells. All cells are surrounded by a thin, flexible boundary known as the cell membrane. And that is what actually separates it from its surroundings. So we've seen these all before. What is this? The whole thing. Animal cell. A prokaryote, that's right, yeah. So animal and plant up at the top and a prokaryote at the bottom. Okay, so this is also something that we have seen. So these are things that we're all familiar with. I told you everything comes back. So homeostasis, what's one word that we can use to remember it? Balance, maintaining balance. But balance is the key. Okay, so homeostasis is maintaining balance where? Inside, internally, okay? So we're maintaining stable internal conditions. This is also known as equilibrium because if we're balanced, we're what? We're equal, okay? So some conditions, and we've talked about a few of these that have to be kept stable, include temperature, pH, water balance, and glucose level. So we've seen 3 of those 4 before, and now we're going to add in glucose level. We talked about that a little bit when we talked about what protein. Think diabetics. Insulin, right? Okay, so we have to maintain our glucose levels. And glucose is a what?
Carbohydrate.
It is a carbohydrate. So it's a what?
Sugar.
A sugar. Yes. Okay, so what exactly is equilibrium? Equilibrium is when the concentration of a substance is the same throughout the area. So if you were to take a cup of water and we dropped some blue food coloring into it, right? What happens when you drop that food coloring in the top? Does it happen immediately? No, it takes time for it to disperse, right? The only way it's going to happen quick is if we what?
Mix it.
Mix it. Mix it or shake it if there's a lid on it, right? That's it. That's the only way it's happening fast. But eventually, when you put that dye in the water, the molecules are going to spread out and disperse evenly, okay? All right, so in order to maintain homeostasis, cells must control which materials move in and out of the cell. And that is done via the cell membrane, okay? That's like the door. That's what lets us in and out of the classroom. Okay, so up here is a picture of the cell membrane. And I don't know if it was your week here or not, but I did draw the cell membrane, a small portion of it up on the board. Okay, so it is made up of heads and tails, but this entire thing is called a phospholipid bilayer. And bi means what? 2. Okay, so it's made up of a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so 2 layers of phospholipids. You have heads up here, down here, and the tails in the middle, okay? So this works kind of like oil and water because oil is a what? And if you were to put oil and water together, what happens? Correct. Why? Why do they separate? They can't mix. Why though? Why does water go to the bottom? Yeah. What did you say? So it goes to the bottom and the oil goes to the top. So there are also protein channels found in here and carbohydrate chains. So when we talked about macromolecules, we talked about how lipids make up the what? The cell membrane. okay? Because the phospholipid bilayer is made up of lipids, okay? But you also find proteins and carbohydrates in the cell membrane, okay? Proteins are channels that allow things to pass through that are too large to just go through the membrane, and then you have your carbohydrate chains, which act as receptors, okay? So they're like an ID tag. So how does the cell membrane regulate the contents of the cell, okay? So carbohydrate chains, okay, there's cell-to-cell recognition, and this is what distinguishes one cell from another. It also is used for rejection of foreign cells by the immune system. The other is cholesterol, and I know I brought this up as an example when we talked about macromolecules. Cholesterol is what macromolecule? A lipid. Yes, a fat, but a lipid, okay? So cholesterol, you'll see within, okay, the membrane here, these yellow pieces.
At this time, sophomores, class rank A to F, please go to the auditorium lobby for makeup pictures. This is for all sophomores, A to F.
Okay. Makeup pictures, if you didn't get your picture. Okay?
Were we supposed to get our picture? Yeah.
Huh?
That was last night.
Yeah. Did they do it last week when we went here?
Oh, last year. Yeah, my friend said
Last
it.
week.
Last week. Let's go.
All right. So cholesterol makes the membrane stronger and harder for small molecules to pass through, okay? Another word, and this word is huge, you need to understand what this word means. So selective permeability or selectively permeable is another way you might see it. So like, remember like I told you from the beginning, like if we don't know what something is, pull it apart. So selective, if you are selective, what does that mean?
So you choose.
If you choose, right? And what does permeable mean? It lets things pass through, okay? So if it's selectively permeable, it's choosing what's going to pass through. Okay, so permeable means things pass through. Impermeable is the opposite, so it does not. So if it's selectively permeable, certain things can pass through. So the cell membrane is selectively permeable, so it chooses what can go in and out.
So that's like
Yes. Okay. All right. So here's another way to look at it. So think of a membrane like a chain link fence. Everybody knows what a chain link fence is, right? So only certain size objects can pass through. So if you try to put a golf ball, it's going to go through, right? But if you try to put a basketball, it's not getting there. A soccer ball, not getting there, right? And then depending on the size of the links, a tennis ball may or may not get through, okay? So,
I mean, it will if you bend it. No.
we're not doing that.
Cut it.
All right, so the cell membrane is impermeable to large molecules like glucose. So impermeable means what? It's not going to pass through, it can't pass through. So that is why you see all these different molecules up here, and certain ones are going to pass through via a protein channel, okay? So because it is selectively permeable, we said it allows some substances to go more easily than others. So these are two other terms you need to know. Hydrophilic and hydrophobic. Okay, phobia. What's a phobia?
Fear.
A fear of something, right? Like arachnophobia. What's that?
Fear of heights.
What did you say?
Arachnophobia. A fear of spiders. Okay? So hydrophobic is the fear of what? Hydro.
Water.
Water. Okay? So hydrophobic tails, these guys here, They don't like water. Hydrophilic heads, these guys, philic, we like it, okay? And so we like water, or we love water. So water-fearing, water-loving. Got it? So the tails,
And the
I'm not afraid of it.
because they're made of what? And what we say about water and fat? They don't mix, right? Okay, so make sure that we know the difference between those. So phobia, no. And philic, yes, okay? So these are your heads, your hydrophilic heads, and in the middle portion of the bilayer, hydrophobic tails, okay? All right, we're gonna finish up with this last little piece. So when we talk about something that's concentrated, we're talking about how crowded an area is. Okay, so if you look up here, you don't have so much going on, so that means it's a what? Low concentration, and over here, it's pretty crowded, so that is a high concentration. Okay, so concentration refers to the crowdedness of an area. This is just an example of liquids moving constantly in random directions in there. And then we are going to talk about this just briefly, but that's really it for the cell membrane itself. But how does the cell membrane regulate the contents of the cell? And it is via transport, okay?